A tempest racks a helpless ship at sea. The passengers, a group of Italian nobles, a king, a duke, their coterie, get in the way of the crew trying to save them. The wind howls, rain falls in blinding sheets. They are certain to be doomed. Hell is empty, and all the devils are here. Then the storm ends. They awake on an enchanted island, separated into different groups. The island's inhabited by spirits, inhuman creatures, and Prospero. Prospero, a magician and former Duke of Milan, has brought them here for vengeance for their betrayal to him long ago. The Tempest is one of Shakespeare's most ambiguous plays, but one that lends itself to so many valid interpretations. I love the mixture of whimsy and supernatural events and characters that are open to a sea of interpretations. I'm here to break this play down for you so that you can appreciate it. Hi, I'm Nathan Harold, and I am here to explain why The Tempest can be such a rewarding reading experience. Thank you for joining me. The Tempest was written and first performed in the year 1611. Shakespeare was toward the end of his career. His greatest masterpieces were several years behind him, and retirement was in the very near future. In fact, he would pass away just 5 years later. The Tempest is one of 3 Shakespeare plays not derived from clear source material. So often, Shakespeare was adept at taking other stories from Ovid or Italian theater and making them completely new and viewing them with his own genius. Only 3 times did he write plays with no direct source material: The Tempest, Love's Labour's Lost, and A Midsummer Night's Dream. Some critics believe Shakespeare put more of himself in this play than in any other. A lot of that has to do with the character Prospero, the magician. We'll talk about him a little bit more later. Shakespeare is most known for his dramas and his comedies, but The Tempest is classified as a romance. Right around 1610, a new genre was forming, one that blended elements of tragedy and comedy. There were deaths and violence and hubris, elements of tragedy, but there were also marriages and unions, elements of a comedy. The label romance gained widespread adoption in the 20th century and is often applied to 4 of Shakespeare's later plays: The Winter's Tale, Pericles, Cymbeline, and The Tempest. By 1611, we're also firmly in the Jacobean era of drama. Defined by violence and bloodlust and revenge often at the center of the play, audience clamored for plays like The Tempest, and The Tempest delivered. If you think this play feels tonally different than Shakespeare's earlier works, you're right. Shakespeare evolved, but so did what his audience wanted. Just like what audiences flock to at the movies today are different than they were 20 years ago. Aren't we exhausted by superhero movies every 6 weeks? Shakespeare was giving the people what they wanted. Outside the London theater, Europe was embarking on a new age of discovery. Faraway lands were being discovered. Tales of shipwreck and adventure were making their way back to England. Most commonly cited as an influence on the source material, William Strachey, a sailor, was shipwrecked with his crewmates for 9 months in Bermuda in 1609. They all survived. Other accounts circulating at the time include John Smith's 1608 journals about Jamestown, Virginia, including brief mentions of a Pocahontas. Nonetheless, although these accounts may have influenced the setting, this is an original play purely from Shakespeare's imagination. I share all of this with you so you have a sense of grounding. Shakespeare was tapping into a sense of wonder at the world beyond Europe. And the sense of wonder imbued in this play is what gives it the vitality that makes it so fascinating to readers today. Now let me talk about 3 of the main characters driving this story. Any of these 3 can take center stage in your mind's eye. And all 3, Prospero, Caliban, and Ariel, can vacillate between good or evil. They all have the ability to take center stage depending on the performance you see them in. Let's start with Prospero, the magician, the old man thirsting for revenge. Prospero has been living on this isolated island for 12 years with his daughter, Miranda. Prospero is the central character. He speaks the most lines and drives the action throughout the story. Prospero was the Duke of Milan until his brother betrayed him, and he's been biding his time, obsessed with revenge. He has the ability to control other characters' movements and actions. Now I want to tell you something about Prospero. Very early on in this play, he talks about his life circumstances, how he ended up on this island. And very early on, you might decide Prospero isn't all that sympathetic. One strike against Prospero is even though he rules the island, he has 2 slaves, Ariel and Caliban. He's imperious toward them, and he's quick to note to each of them how grateful they should be because he saved them in the past. The second issue we might have with Prospero is that he talks about how he lost his dukedom. And the reason is because he spent all of his time reading books. And by doing so, his brother was able to usurp his administrative duties and betray him. He considers this action by his brother the main betrayal, and it drives his anger. So at this point, you might be thinking, wait a minute, Prospero. You had this job. You didn't seem to like it. You weren't good at it. So what's wrong with you losing all that power? And I will share with you something that will make Prospero a little bit more palatable throughout the remainder of the play. Prospero is supposed to follow a redemption arc. He transforms from bad to good over the course of the play. The Tempest was a counterbalance to the very popular Dr. Faustus, about a good man who sells his soul to the devil. Prospero is the reverse. He starts off steeped in dark magic and goes in the other direction. He transforms from bad to good. Whether Prospero's redemption arc really satisfies you comes down to the final act. Now, even though Prospero has the most lines in the play, in some cases, Ariel may be the heart of the show. Ariel is an airy sprite. He works to fulfill Prospero's plans. In exchange, he expects to be set free. Now, in a play full of sound and music, Ariel is at the center of it. Ariel would have been played by an adept musician during Shakespeare's time, because throughout the play there are different songs and performances. So Ariel, in different renditions, may be playing a pipe, a tabor, or a guitar, and sings several interludes throughout the play. Caliban is the third main character, and the most difficult to classify. I could make a whole video about how Caliban has been represented in different eras. Caliban is native to the island. He's an inhuman creature whose sparse description does not fit into any of the common classifications of other monsters or creatures that we know. At various times throughout the play, he's described as misshapen, a beast, half a fish and half a monster, puppy-headed, a strange thing as ever I looked on, and more. Prospero says Caliban is the son of a witch and the devil, a fact that we don't know whether or not is true. We also know Caliban attempted to rape Prospero's daughter, Miranda. Now, how this detail is presented in performance or omitted in some performances can strongly influence whether you find Caliban to be sympathetic or a vile, inhuman creature. There's a lot of debate about Caliban's creative origins. There is no consensus, and there's not even enough evidence to build a case with any certainty. But some theories include, 1, Caliban perhaps being African. This is because the island is somewhere between Africa and Italy. Another theory is that he is Native American, and this is because of the incoming reports about the New World at this time. A third possibility is Caliban was influenced by popular conceptions of the Irish. At this time, they were almost always described in pejorative terms: inhuman, violent, magical, uncultured, all terms applied to Caliban throughout the play. One thing we do know is that Caliban is motivated to lead some of the refugees on a drunken quest to overthrow Prospero. The play spans a single afternoon on this mysterious island in the Mediterranean. Shakespeare often uses condensed timelines to amp up the drama. The shipwrecked passengers are divided into several groups around the island. There's a budding romance. There are 2 passengers who get drunk and dream of ruling the island. There's a king who mourns his losses while members of his party plan to overthrow him. Each group is led along by Caliban or Ariel or Prospero. I want to address the plot challenge very quickly. Act 1, Scene 2, Prospero is recounting his sob story. It's a lot of exposition, and then he recounts Ariel's backstory and then Caliban's backstory. Why is this challenging? Well, we're used to a narrative structure where timing is sequential. Here's an example. You get a call from a friend and your friend says, "Hey, I just got betrayed by a close friend. I lost my job." And you say, wait, tell me. You need to tell me what happened. And then your friend launches into a story. Well, hey, you know how I like reading about magic? Well, I was at the coffee shop down on Broadway reading this romantasy series and thinking I really need to cut my caffeine intake because I get so jittery, and I thought about quitting, but every time I've tried that in the past, I get headaches, and even though I drink more water, I still need aspirin for a couple weeks, but we're just so socially conditioned to drinking coffee when we meet people, and it's really an exploitative industry. So I'm trying to split the difference by ordering matcha lattes, but not to the point that I get labeled performative and blah, blah, blah. Your reaction might be, I don't care. Tell me the story. And if you're reading, this is especially a challenge because of the elliptical nature of Prospero's speech. What do I mean by that? Prospero is agitated and his language is fragmented. Words are dropped or truncated, so it can be difficult to follow. I found that in performance this is less of an issue. An actor is able to demonstrate the pauses and intersperse with stage movements to make this more fluid. But just a warning, the rest of the play becomes much smoother after Act 1, Scene 2. So these characters bound around the island, each with their own grand schemes, almost none of which go according to plan. There's a lot in here that pokes at the lines between reality and illusion. It's not just the magus who's conjuring realities and fantasies. We all do it in different circumstances. Eventually, all the characters are going to come together. That's when we see how Prospero treats those who did him wrong, when he stands face to face with them. A key theme of this play is reckoning with power. How can it be wielded for positive outcomes versus when is it tyrannical? Do people in positions of power lose something of themselves, even if they've just had a brief taste of power? I want to talk about how this play would have been performed, because it's full of sound and special effects and music, and often when we're reading, we can kind of breeze over the stage directions. Of all Shakespeare's plays, this one really leans into theatricality. There's a storm, there's songs, there's an odd play within a play scene called a mask. He was really capturing the special effects that were available in that era. Aside from the thunder and lightning, Ariel is often showing up with an instrument. He uses the instrument to enchant characters throughout the play or lead them from point A to point B. For a reader skimming past the musical cues, it's important to just keep in mind that the music would really shape the experience of a performance. I want to talk about one of the strangest scenes, a mask scene. Mask scenes were very common during this time. They were opportunities to show off the special effects of that era. In the Tempest, there are representations in this mask of Juno and Ceres and Iris, while the rest of the characters become spectators. In some performances, there can be dancing or acrobatics, or new art representations that don't really fit anywhere else in the play. You might come across this scene and wonder what kind of drugs Shakespeare and his audience were on at the time. 3 things to keep in mind. First, mask scenes would have made perfect sense to the audience at this time. Second, Prospero is conjuring this mask. You're not actually seeing these Roman gods and goddesses on the stage. They're all figments of Prospero's imagination. And third, understand that this mask scene is reinforcing the play's themes. That is its point. Harmony versus discord, union versus disunion. Many view this play as providing important insight into Shakespeare's demeanor at the time. They often read Shakespeare and Prospero as having a lot of overlap. After all, Shakespeare, like Prospero, pulls the strings of the characters and orchestrates the events throughout the play. Both are weary, both have been obsessed with a singular craft for many years of their lives, and are now entering a stage of transition where they are about to embark on something new. There are 2 speeches in particular that could be considered as Shakespeare speaking directly to the audience. I'm going to read one of them from Act 4. This is Prospero speaking to a character that's just gone through several trials throughout the course of the play. Prospero says, "You do look, my son, in a moved sort, as if you were dismayed. Be cheerful, sir. Our revels now are ended. These, our actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherits shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, often applied to theater, but could also apply to life itself. So my recommendation, because stagecraft is so important in this play, is after reading this once, definitely seek out any performance you can find. A movie, a local production, it doesn't matter, but it's going to add a lot of context to this play. For those seeking related reading material, one unavoidable influence on this is Montaigne's writing of the Cannibals, which challenged the popular belief that Europe's technological and scientific progress were inseparable from moral progress. In other words, challenging the popular European belief at that time that anyone outside of Europe was appropriately termed a savage. There's strong evidence for this influence. In Act 2, a character, Gonzalo, gives a lengthy, seemingly digressive speech about how he would organize a perfect society. His view is very closely tied with Montaigne's. He describes an idyllic society, free from vice and legal and moral evils. His society is virtuous. It's an idyllic vision that clashes with the royal plot lines of the play. If you want to explore other Jacobean drama, I would start by recommending Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe, written in 1594. Christopher Marlowe is an extremely popular contemporary of Shakespeare's. Just remember, Dr. Faustus is the foil to this play's redemption arc. I'm curious what you think of this odd play. Which characters are you drawn to? Does the redemption arc satisfy you? And what do you make of Caliban? Time with Shakespeare is time well spent. I do find the more I read his plays, the more I mine out of them. If you've read this, let me know what you think. And if you've seen a performance, let me know which characters really stuck with you, or if there were non-textual elements that really made an impression. I'd like to hear what those were as well. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Keep reading, keep exploring, keep living.